The first season of The Dark Crystal Age of Resistance finally hit Netflix on August 30th, and it's finally time to dive in and review it. You're watching Planet Grady Media. This video will have tons of spoilers for The Dark Crystal Age of Resistance. Not to mention, of course, spoilers for the original 1982 film, The Dark Crystal. So if you haven't seen either of those and want to be surprised, you should absolutely turn back now. This will be a full review, so there's a lot to unpack here, and I will be doing my best to get through it as quickly as possible, but I'm also going to include chapter times in the description below, so you can jump around to your favorite topics if you want to. Right out the gate and consistently throughout the entire series, The Dark Crystal Age of Resistance has amazing visuals, many of which I'm sure are going to end up being my iPhone wallpaper for quite some time. And before I dive into the actual voice cast of this series, I have to give some huge nods to the actual puppeteers and performers from the Jim Henson Company for their amazing performances of these characters. The physicality of it all just works so well. And all of the characters really are just so humanized. Just the little things that they do, the little mannerisms they have, the way that they move, all of it unique to the character, and all of it flows so well with the voice acting. I really couldn't believe it. I found myself getting lost and forgetting that I was watching puppets, which is really helpful. And I have to say that's something that the original film never really quite achieves for me. The puppetry in the film is also very, very impressive. But um much of it, like, it just, you can tell it's puppets, right? At some point, you can tell, and that's fine. But this show makes that so difficult, and I was really, really impressed by it. But yes, the voice acting was also equally phenomenal. So phenomenal that I actually kept forgetting who the cast was, which is also really good. Taron Egerton as Rianne, the title role, is phenomenal. I think it takes him a little bit to get into the character because I think the first couple episodes, some of his lines come off as kind of cheesy, but I also think it kind of opens up a little cheesy and kind of gets to the good stuff as it goes along. Rian also quite obviously being uh, the father of Jen from the original film, so much so that they almost they pretty much look identical down to the bangs and the blue highlights, which I guess are a natural thing. They just grow bangs, I guess. Nathalie Emmanuel as Deet is also really good. Deet herself being a really interesting character. Very innocent, very oblivious to a lot of the things happening in the larger world above her. Anya Taylor-Joy as Bria was also really good. Jason Isaacs as the Emperor was also very, very good. The Emperor, of course, we didn't really get to see much of. He dies within like the first 10 of the movie. And so we never really get to see what he was like when he was healthy and alive and in full emperor form. And we got a lot of him in the series, and it was exceptional. Gugu Mbatha as Seladon was really great also, for especially once we get to Celadon's more shining moments halfway through the series. And Helena Bonham Carter as the Maudra, who I also didn't realize was Helena Bonham Carter the entire time I watched it. I don't know how I didn't realize that, but she really got into this role. It's definitely a different kind of character for Helena, so I think that's probably part of it, but it was really cool that she did it. There's all kinds of other great cast members in here that pop up and other big names, and I could go on and on about this cast because it really is phenomenal. But I gotta move on. The story itself is also really strong in this series, which I think was going to be a crucial element because the Dark Crystal, as exciting as it is for it to return, I think it was very easy for it to become a cheesy mess if it was done incorrectly. But I'm happy to report that the story here was really solid, and actually elevates the original in so many ways. First of all, we get way more about the lore of, Thra as a world and as a planet. And it does so not only by providing more exposition, but it really ups the scale of Thra as a world. One of the critiques I think I have of the original is how small scale it was. You only have a handful of characters that are really featured in the film when you really think about it. And Thra, despite it being this big kind of mysterious alien world, we don't get to see a lot of it because there's only so much you can do in, an hour and a half movie that can really demonstrate Thra as a world. It just gives way more to work with that really enriches the story as it goes along, as opposed to the original film, which was very light in terms of character and character development. Plus, I really appreciated that not only did they add more numbers to the Gelfling characters, but they added more types. Representation is a big thing in Hollywood right now, and you wouldn't think that that's important in a fantasy story like this where you're not even really dealing with humans. But this series, if anything, demonstrated actually how not only important it is, but also how effective for your story it can be. And how it can actually bring your audience in and allow them to still relate to these otherworldly characters and thus invest in your show. It also unexpectedly featured um, Deet's parents as being a same sex couple. And they completely breeze over that. And I love that. I love that it didn't need to be a big deal, that it wasn't different in any way. It doesn't seem to phase anyone as if it's unnormal in a certain way. It's a normal Gelfling family. It just happens to be two dads. And I thought that was fantastic. That is how representation is done. It's not about putting them in there and then singling them out for being different and using them as a plot device. It's about just seamlessly putting them in there like you would any other character and just moving along with your story. I thought it was great. Something that was pretty crucial in this series was the concept of dreamfasting, which was introduced in the original film as something Gelflings can do to essentially share memories or view each other's memories. And I have to say, I'm not the biggest fan of dreamfasting because in the original film, it kind of bothered me because it just seemed like it was just a matter of convenience. Because all of a sudden, you have two characters who know nothing about each other, have never met, didn't even know that the possibility of the other character could exist, but then they get to just touch hands and suddenly skip down memory lane with the audience, and suddenly they're filled in completely on each other's lives, and it's like they've known each other forever. And it just comes off so cheap, I guess. So I don't know, it's just way too convenient in terms of just giving out exposition. I will say that Age of Resistance does this much more elegantly, and it comes across much more mystical as something the Gelflings can do because of their connection to Thra and how strong Thra is to the universe itself. And there was a lot of it very early on in the series, to the point that it kind of started to bother me, especially that big one they had where Rianne is filling everybody in at the bar or whatever about what's been happening, and his dad just happens to walk in and just invite himself to the dream fasting, and suddenly everything is a-okay, super easy. That bothered me. But I did like that it eventually led up to Agra tapping into their dream fasting, like hijacking it so she could have like this Avengers style powwow with all of the characters. I did like that. I did like that it was something that at the very least connected the characters a little more spiritually and a little more mystically, more so again than it seemed in the original film. And their little Avengers powwow, their little meeting with Agra, like she's Zordon or something, was, I thought it was it was actually pretty cool. It was hard not to appreciate it, even though I found Dreamfasting to be so annoying. I really liked the Almadra and her whole storyline, and her, even though she was hesitant about hearing about some of the stuff that was actually happening, she was still open to it, and thus worthy of being part of the little Avengers team. But what ripped my heart into shreds was how short-lived that was, because she gets out of the little Avengers powwow all empowered, and she's like, yeah, we're gonna save the Gelflings and save Thra, and she's super jazzed about being part of the super team, and then she walks down the hallway and is killed instantly. But it was just disappointing because I actually really liked her, and it seemed like just when she was getting to be really strong and really great, she got killed off, and it was really sad to see, but I guess that's kind of the point of doing it. Which of course brings me to dear sweet Seladon, who right out the gate of the entire series is super entitled and annoying. I'm not a fan of Seladon. I'm just going to say that right now. I am not team Seladon in any way. No, but the beginning of the series, middle of the series, end of the series, not team Seladon. I could do without her. But it was it was fun to watch though, her journey, especially, her mom gets killed in front of her, which is entirely her fault, in case you're wondering. And then, she goes into this fit of rage about her because she's so appalled that her mom would stand up to their lords. And she really gets on her high horse and, talking about how, she will burn her mother's traitorous body, and all of that good stuff. And then her attempt at getting the Almadra crown. And I loved that she got challenged for the crown. And like the entitled little brat she didn't handle it well. And instead of going through with the traditional challenge and earning the crown the right way, she has like this fit where she just kind of decides it's hers, and she makes like a whole new outfit. She just like gives herself a makeover and walks in there and declares herself their leader. And I really want to see what that night before was, because the dress alone is insane. Like they I think they mentioned that it even looks like it's a tribute to the Skeksis. And I have no doubt that it was, because she was already like super moist about serving them. But she also, gets herself this new gothic scary crown that I really want to know where she got. Like, was that just laying around the castle somewhere? Or did she make it herself? Was she just like up all night hot gluing that thing together? And then she digs out her evil queen makeup palette and, starts beating her face, with it so she can look like a total drag queen. Just like, yeah, I'm gonna own these hoes. They ain't gonna take my crown today. Nope, nope, nope. Just looking like she's completely flown off the rails going in there. And then gets completely humiliated, you know, which I thought it was great because the Skeksis, of course, don't care about her at all. And she gets thrown into prison where her other sister is already hanging out for pretty much the entire season, and also probably could have been avoided had Seladon not been such a colossal idiot and wasted so much time. And then, in The Great Escape, her sister gets killed exactly the same way her mom does. And her relationship with Bria, like, I can only imagine at that point, because the way she talks to, like, she's so ready to sell Bria down the river, really, even before their mom died, right? Like, she just has such a problem with Bria, and she's just so ready to just hand her sister over. And then she's like, oh god, yeah, sorry, I just feel so bad, just I made so many stinks. How was I supposed to know? God, like, it's so hard. Give some half-ass apology to Bria. And Bria, if I were in Bria's position, I would have slit her throat. Or I would have, broken her legs, in the woods out there and just left her for the Skeksis and been like, you know what, enjoy the essence. This one's on us. See you at the battle. The whole reason, she's a major reason of why things are so hard for them toward the end of the season is because of her. The whole thing would have been much easier had she just kept her damn mouth shut from the beginning. But instead of being mad at her, Bria just totally caves and they hug it out. Oh my god, I don't care that you've killed Mumsy. I'm just so glad we're sisters. I love you, Seladon. Oh, it's so ridiculous. All of the episodes involving the Circle of the Suns in the Crystal Desert I thought were amazing. Probably my favorite parts of the whole season. I love the way the Crystal Desert looks. I could look at that forever. And the whole idea of a Skeksis and a Mystic, two halves of the same whole, actually getting along and not needing to be on opposing forces just because they were split in half, I thought was great. In fact, all they want to do is be united because they were like, we were probably better when we were together, so why would we not want to do that? Along with that, the Hunter and the Archer story I thought was also really good because it's another pair, unlike the Heretic and the Wanderer, the ones that live in the Circle of the Suns. These two, oppose each other just like the other ones do, essentially, but there's an actual genuine rivalry between the two. And with the in the original film, even though it was obvious that the Skeksis and the Mystics were the same beings, essentially, they, other than the physical stuff, they didn't really talk about the relationship between the two and the dynamics between those two. Um, which is why it was really great to see a set of them really get along and a set of them really have a rivalry like the Hunter and the Archer, and you really get to feel like there's a history and that there's a, a past between them that has led up to this moment where they're either going to kill each other or they're going to unite together when the crystal is fixed. And unfortunately they end up taking each other out because they're both on very just different missions. um, but it was just a really good piece of the story. Plus, the way the Hunter moves and is done visually in the show is just great. I did appreciate that there wasn't too much romance in this one, and that was something that seemed very forced in the original film between Jen and Kira, and I get it, they're the last two Gelflings supposedly on the planet anyway, so yeah, why not? They're probably gonna have it together. But that was something that I didn't think would be needed in this series, and I'm glad they didn't do it too much. Though there is what seems to be a really forced really forced connection between Rian and Deet. And not that those two couldn't have a connection and end up together. I just felt like it happened too fast and too suddenly. In fact, if I was Deet, I would get the hell out of there because Rian's long-term girlfriend just died. In fact, it's one of the sparking moments in the beginning of the series that sends him on this quest is him watching his girlfriend die and get the essence sucked out of her body, only to then just days later all of a sudden be running around flirting with Deet, and he's already asking to go back to her home and chill with her parents again and all this stuff. Like, whoa, pump the freaking brakes, dude. Like, he just seems like someone that just needs to be in a relationship of some sort. Like, he just can't be alone. Maybe he needs to go figure himself out first. Um, but it's like, oh my god, we've been hanging out for 5 minutes. Let's move in together. And it's pretty obvious that I believe he's obviously Jen's father, but it's obviously pretty set up that Deet is probably going to end up being Jen's mother, because she, of course, ends up getting visions of Jen and, him as a baby and running around trying to save him. And, of course, then visions of the actual film where he's, repairing the crystal and stuff like that. So it's a really, really good setup, and I am fine with that outcome. It just seems way too soon to be doing all that. And for her too, because she's like, whoa, back off, dude. Because not only are you like a category 5 clinger, but I'm also full of the Darknin currently, and I have my own stuff going on. I really loved seeing the crystal shard, and that being, of course, the gem that was in the dual glaive, which was the big mystical weapon they had to find. Because in the original film, it's pretty happenstance. It's, despite the crystal being so mystical in itself, the shard doesn't always come off that way. It does a little bit here and there in certain scenes when Jen is interacting with it. But for the most part, the journey Jen has to go on to go find it and fix the crystal is pretty cut and dry. He just goes to Agra's house, and who essentially has it in like a drawer or something in her house, and just gives it to him so he can just go to the castle and pop it in. And that's why he manages to wrap it up in an hour and a half. So I liked it being treated as a bigger deal this time around, and it looks like it's going to be a big symbol for the resistance, in fact, and for their little rebellion that they've formed, because now it's the only thing that really makes the Gelflings as a whole a major threat to them. And of course, it's kind of rough because we know, based on the original film, that it's still not gonna work out for them. But it's definitely a nice step to see. And of course, the big teaser at the end was the creation of the Garthams, which I thought was a genius tie into the original film because they were such a big deal in the original film. And we didn't really know where the hell they came from. But to see them be created, first of all, the way they were created was, I thought, really great. But it also really shows the prowess of the scientist and how much he really does, and how much of the Skeksis empire really rests on the scientist, even though he tends to get treated not so hot a lot of the time. Plus, something that was covered in, I believe, the Dark Crystal comics and things like that was the Garthim Wars, which is what ends up wiping out the Gelflings. So, if this series gets picked up for more seasons, which not only do I hope, but I honestly think it will, I hope that's something that they cover. Now, was this series better than the original? Because it's a little tricky, right? Prequels are always tricky, especially with something so much of a cult classic. And this was a challenge that Star Wars actually faced because, going into the Phantom Menace, yes, the technology is better and you can potentially create a really epic story that can add some things to the original one people love, but you also have to do it well, and you have to do it in a way that keeps audiences around, even though they know how things end. And Star Wars, The Phantom Menace, even though now it's a pretty nostalgic movie for a lot of fans, it was pretty roughly received, right? It was still good enough to keep people around and invested, especially since, the original films are already a pretty strong trilogy that kept fan interest. But it got a lot of criticism and it had a lot of problems. So I was afraid that this would be a similar thing with the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance. I'm happy to report that it's not. In fact, I dare to say that I actually like the series now better than the original film, which is a big deal because I actually really like the original film. I think that unlike something like The Phantom Menace, Age of Resistance is equally visually strong and equally strong in writing and story. And I think those are really, really important. And I think together it makes Age of Resistance a massive powerhouse, and I think is what will finally turn the Dark Crystal into a fully fledged franchise, which I think it deserves to be. I think the story itself is ingenious enough and strong enough that it deserves to be a franchise with all kinds of storytelling incorporated into it. So if I were to give this a letter grade, I would absolutely give this an A plus. I think it deserves that. I think it's great, and I loved every minute of it, even the parts that I thought I didn't. Even the little problems I had with it, I totally forgave it overall because the series was just so good. Definitely A plus, 100%. Go watch it. But that'll do it for my review of Dark Crystal Age of Resistance. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. Also, make sure to like this video if you haven't done that already, and to make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss anything coming out of my channel. And of course, I will see you next time.